Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Inner Estate with your host, Bridget Ann Stuart. Our guest today is Wani Iris Manly, Esquire. Hello, Wani. Thank you for being
Hi,
our guest.
thank you for having me.
I am thrilled that you're here because you are someone who is passionate and committed and in action about change in life and creating the life you truly desire. And that is something that I am also passionate about. So, Wani, you are not only an attorney, you are also a best-selling author, a keynote speaker, and you've had your own TED Talk. So, and you just have overcome so many challenges in your mindset in your life and creating that life that you truly want to live. So
Yeah.
I'm going to pass this to you. What can you share with everyone? I guess it's a broad topic, but really about change. How can how can we embrace it?
So first, I want to say thank you for actually having me. And as I wrote to you before, one of the reasons why I actually reached out to you was because I just love the name of the podcast. Not just because I'm an IP lawyer and I just it's like ingrained in me, but it's just like it really encapsulates what I talk about, which is change, and that is changes everything. Meaning, like when you begin to change on the inside, then everything else on the outside begins to change. And we're at a time right now where we don't have any other choice but to change. We can no
Right.
longer be who we were 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. It's not because like we're frauds, but it's just because life is just, progress in such a way to where like we don't have a choice. We have to evolve from who we've been to who we actually are supposed to be, I like to say. And
Mhm.
so for me, it's just been something that's just been very innate for me, but at the same time, it's also been very messy. I always like to say, the things I've actually gone through, because going through any type of change in search of freedom, which is what I was actually looking for, to live the life that I really wanted, not the life that was actually carved out for me. It requires purification. So, and that's where the resilience actually comes in. But I always like to say, a lot of us, when we're going through it, the hurricanes, we're in the eye of the storm. Sometimes we think we're punished, and we're not being punished at all. We're actually being purified. It's purification. So, and I've come to realize those of us who actually chose to say yes to that challenge is because what we're living for is for a much greater cause, and it's not about ourselves. It's for other people.
So I think that's remarkable. So it's not punishment, it is purification,
Yeah, we're being purified. Yeah.
and it never ends.
No, it doesn't end, but it does get easier because you grow through it. Like I can tell you from you, like I've been living through a very pressurized um I don't know, of a situation just like existence. I follow astrology, and it's just been because of an astrological transit, because of
Mhm.
Saturn being like I'm my sign of Pisces, so Saturn is very prescient. I really the last 3 years have been living in what is just like the analogy of the diamond going through
Yes,
the rough. You know what I mean? And so in Saturn,
right.
yeah, it just left Pisces a couple not too long ago, and it's where I could be like, and I realized like, wow, being under that pressure versus when I was working for a law firm and I was working a pressure cooker. Back then I felt like I couldn't handle it, because it was just so intense. But I mean, for this pressure cooker, it just I just knew what to do. It's like, okay, you know what? This is what it is. And it's like, okay, we're going to work with this energy, and you just keep going. And so you just become a different person because you grow through it. And yeah, with as much as you're waking up every single morning, there is going to be some type of, something we have to face.
Well, I have a question, and it's very funny that you mentioned that about Saturn and being under that pressure and being in pressure when you were working at the law firm. Now
Mhm,
you have your own company and your own practice, right? So it
mhm,
still presents pressures, but it's just different. And I believe you've shared that you had a lot of learning curves as you were going through getting that to where it is now.
mhm.
Do you ever regret leaving the law practice where you were? Did you have times when you left there and you were in the new pressure cooker where you actually wanted the old one back? Or has it just been a solid decision and you knew that it was right as you've been building it?
For me, it was a solid decision because I'll tell you what, prior to me actually starting a law firm, I actually spent a year actually interviewing for other positions while I was in Miami. And the issue was that I was working for, it was a Chicago-based law firm, but it was an international law firm, and the headquarters was in Chicago, but I was working in the Miami office. So which means the checks are being cut from and Miami even if it's a super expensive city, it has one of the lowest salaries in the country. And so everywhere I kept going, I kept hearing, "Wanting you too expensive." And it wasn't because I'm out of vanity or even like because I have this extreme high self-worth. It was just because I had bought a 300 grand condo in Miami on the Miami River. I was driving a Porsche Boxster. I had bills to pay, and I literally could not afford to make a penny or a dollar less than what I was
Right.
getting paid because I had to pay my mortgage. And so after a year of actually hearing, "We love you, but you're too expensive. Can you make, can we pay you this?" And I was like, no, I just felt like it was the thing for me to actually do. So there wasn't looking back, and I just realized I was just going to make it work. And like I said, I have actually developed my own inner mantra of resilience, which is it's not working is not an option. Which for me is there's never is a plan B. I never think if it doesn't work out for me, it is going to work out. I don't care how
It's
long.
going to work out for you.
Yeah.
And you just know that by having that mindset every day, you're going to do as much as you're able to do in that day to move towards the goal.
Yeah, and I'm very intentional about the way that I live. So, for example, like I have a very overarching intention for my life, which is to live my highest calling in this lifetime. Let me live my full potential. And so every single day, let me see it, let me smell it, like illuminate that path for me. Let it be all that I hear. Let it be all that I'm actually attuned to, like remove all the distractions. So, with that intention being set every single day, I'm just fully confident, okay, and I'm always asking the universe, God, to guide my actions and my directions in furtherance of that. So even if I'm actually going through like a thunderstorm, I just know, okay, this is helping me, this is serving me in some way for the overarching goal.
When you look at working towards your goal, having your own company, writing your best-selling books, which I want to make sure we touch on your book. It's really about getting out of survival mode and creating that passionate life that you want to live. What happens? How do you handle it if you make a mistake along the way and then there's a consequence for the mistake that you've made? I know that in my work, a lot of us are very driven and high achievers, and there can be such a feeling of disappointment in ourselves or failure that it can actually exacerbate the entire situation. So, if as you're launching your company and you're building this, if you made a mistake, how did you handle that?
One, I actually own up to it. And I will also have to say, too, being a lawyer where everything just kind of like falls on you, where you can't blame your paralegal, you can't, like, being an accountant as well, too, right? You're just responsible for your own taxes. Like, there is very little room for error for me because if
Right,
I mess up, for example, as an IP lawyer, if I miss a deadline, the client's application gets abandoned and things like that. There's actual
right.
consequences of it. So I'm always like very meticulous and I'm always just very, very careful. But in the few instances where that actually happens, I just own up to it, and just like,
Mhm.
understand, like, okay, people mess up. It happens sometimes. It wasn't intentional. And I just move on to corrections. One, I'm very spiritual in how I actually live my life in terms I have my foot in both the corporate world, the business world, and very much the spiritual world as well too. And I just know that, at some point in time, not at some point in time, at all times, we are all doing the very best that we can based on our level of consciousness. And it really is based on like, our subconscious mind is actually like running the show anyway. And so
Right, right.
I forgive myself because I just feel like the opposite end of that, which is beating yourself up and telling yourself you're a piece of crap. Number one is
Yeah.
not true. Number two doesn't serve you like at all one way or the other. And number three, there's always some learning in whatever, mistakes or missteps you actually take.
Well, it's really interesting, and I know that forgiveness and self-forgiveness is one of the recurring things that you discuss.
Yeah.
And I think about self-forgiveness. I heard a quote from one of my mentors, and they described forgiving ourselves as a difficult and violent task. And I questioned, I'm like, violent? How is it violent? And he said, because we will fight it. It's like a war. You are at
Mm,
war with yourself. So he described it as violent. And it was interesting because after he gave me that, I was able to have some breakthroughs
mm-hmm.
in letting go of some old, because frankly, Wani, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's current things that we may do that we need to forgive ourselves for.
Yeah.
But how often do things from the past crop up and we have to let go of that as well?
Yeah, it's a forever journey. And I'll be, one thing about me is I'm very real, and I'm very
Hmm.
authentic. And I'll just tell you actually, so one of the things I've been working on forgiving myself for, which is actually going to be my next TED talk I'm going to do, is actually coming to the fact that I may not be a mother. And it's just it stems from a couple of things. One, my background is West African. My family's from Liberia. Even I was born in the United States. And so in our culture, education, success, and high achieving is just everything. And so I didn't grow up in a culture where my mother was telling me, go date. In fact, I was prohibited
Right.
from actually dating. You know what I mean? I was, not encouraged to have sex. I was, it was just like, I was just told, be a lawyer, be successful. So me getting that job, driving a Porsche and having like, a loft in Miami, like that, my parents were super proud of all of that. Part of my success have come to the point of where it's been instead of like relationships for me have not been part of the forefront, you know what I mean? And so, and then also to, living in survival mode, no matter what the income bracket was, it just doesn't matter because it's more about the energy as opposed to what your bank account looks like, although the bank account is a factor to it. And so
Right.
I've had to find myself where it's like, okay, now that I want to have a child and there's all these like society, these all this like noise of you're too old and can you actually do it? And I'll just share with you right before I came on here, I actually made an appointment with the fertility clinic.
Mhm.
And I've had to work with, you know what? And because when I was preparing for my first TED Talk, I was actually at the same time, I was filming or part of a documentary about manifestation that was being made. And there was a conflict resolution specialist on the, that was part of the team that was helping all of us, the participants. And we were having a talk right before, like maybe like 2 weeks before the first TED Talk. And it just came out in my session with her that I am going to be giving a second talk, and it's going to be about me becoming a mother at a later age in life and defying what the doctors are all saying and what society tells you. Or it's going to be where I come to the end of my life and say, you know what? It didn't happen for me because my path was what it was in terms of like I was
Right.
just pushed into, okay, focusing on, provided for myself and and I've forgiven myself for that. And I'm
Mhm.
still forgiving myself for that as I made the appointment, as I'm going to, and I know what doctors are going to tell me, you're too old and you're too this and you're too that. I'm like, you know what? I'm never going to trust my body's fate into a doctor. You know what I mean? I just believe in a higher power. And, it's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it because I know at the end of my deathbed, when I ask myself, what is the one thing you will not forgive yourself for, or what you will regret is actually not trying.
That's a yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So now you're going to have that peace in your heart and soul that
Yeah.
you gave it your all.
Yeah.
Whichever so you're detached from the outcome is going to be what it will be, and the
Yeah.
universe will provide, and that but you will know that you took the actions that were available to you.
And it's just been like, yeah, you just forgive it. And that's like a huge, even as I'm talking about it now, it's just I can feel it in my heart because it's been
Mhm.
one of my deepest heart's desire. And it's like realizing, my God, I did all this and I didn't do the one thing that I really wanted to do. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay,
Right.
I'm hoping it's not too late. So yeah.
Well, I wish you all of the best with that, and I'm really glad that you are pursuing it fully and
Thank
don't
you.
accept the first no,
Yeah.
right? And continue to pursue that.
Thank you.
It's if you could help someone with a way to forgive yourself. So let's say someone's listening to you and I talk and they're like, yeah, I hear this, forgive yourself in the past and even mistakes you're making now. How do you actually do it? How could someone actually forgive themselves?
I think honestly, it does come with it comes with a spiritual practice. It comes with whatever that may look like for you. It also comes from just wisdom, knowing, and just really when I say at all times, everyone's only doing the very best that they can based on what they've got. And so if you knew better, you would have done better. If I would have had the foresight that I have right now, 25 years ago, I would have getting married and having a baby a priority. You know what I mean?
Right.
I would have put my career on the back burner. And so it's literally just really coming to a point to say, you know what? And then also too, for me, and just or coming into the reality or the truth is that everything that has happened in your life, it was supposed to happen. And how do you know that's because it has happened? It happened the way that was actually supposed to happen because that's just how it turned out. So there's no reason for you to beat up on yourself other than just to forgive yourself. And that's really it just and any of you, if you can't even get there, putting your hand on your heart and just being silent, just feeling that love from your heart to yourself would do so much wonders than like journaling or whatever, just really it's like
Right.
heart coherent, you know what I mean? It does a whole lot for you. It begins to open up the contracted energy, the callousness that you might feel. It begins to open up the grief and the whatever you're feeling in there. It's like just to connect with your heart because these days we're so connected to so many gadgets. Like there's very little
That's
time
right.
to even contemplate, let alone to just do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have, our hands are full.
Yes.
And yeah, it's that's interesting that you mentioned that. That I want to reflect on how often I am doing that particular motion. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. I think that that is a powerful way to connect with yourself that many of us may have gotten away from or maybe never experienced.
Yeah, and we have to also look, this is where life, I always say life is this is not a dress rehearsal. Whether you believe in
Right.
past lives and those things like that, even if you do, and if you or you've had the experience of like seeing yourself in a former life, which I have, doesn't matter to me. It's like I just remember right now. And so do you really want to this is all you've got. This is it. It's like, do you really want to spend your days, your time on this earth in this body, like criticizing yourself and beating yourself up because no one's going to see your own magnificence except for you. No one's going to see your
Right.
own or love you the way. And it's like, it's just, you just get to a point of saying, there is no point other than doing this right here, which is loving myself like unconditionally and profusely and like, you know,
And being in the moment of it.
yeah.
In your book, you really talk about survival mode and
Hmm.
how that's afflicting so many people, especially in our society.
Yeah.
Could you share more about how can people tell if they're in survival mode or they're not? And if they do find that they're operating on a daily practice in survival mode, what steps would you recommend?
Well, I think it's easy. So, for example, if you don't have enough money to pay your bills, like you're absolutely 100% in survival mode. So, I think it's quite easy to like from that perspective. But let's just say, okay, there isn't like a money stressor because the money part is it's a huge deal, right? But look at your energy. How are you feeling on
Hmm.
a daily basis? Like, do you not, the minute you say you don't have enough time to do anything, you're 100% in survival mode. If you
Right.
cannot sit like for an hour to eat your food and without looking at something, without, doom scrolling, you're
Right.
in survival mode. You know what I mean? If you can't even like take like a deep breath, you're in survival mode. If you can't really even hear your thoughts, if you're stressing about the worried about the future, or if you're stuck in the past, you're in survival mode. And so for me, I really have found out is it's more of an energy than anything that's really creating the external circumstances. But we're so fixated on the external circumstances. So what we do is, okay, I'm going to work hard. It's like it's a lack of peace with any that you feel. It's anxiety with any that you feel that's causing you to not make any money. That's causing you not to have any different clients. So it's like, you know what? Tend to your energy first. But in the West, we're not taught that. You know what I mean? We're
Right.
just taught to just kind of
Right.
like keep going and like, it's like to do like the whole band-aid approach. And so, deep breaths, people really underestimate like just sitting down and just breathing for like, for 10 minutes. Like there's box breathing. The Navy SEALs actually does. It's just like, breathing out for 4, holding for 4,
Right.
breathing out and releasing. I mean, just 6 minutes of that every single day will tremendously change your life. So you need to just get into a point to where like, the mind isn't going like this. And so the minute you just have to be calmed down, then you begin to have different choices to be able to come in for you to take the different action steps to get you out of the external like showings of survival mode.
Well, and I really appreciate that you mentioned that it's not necessarily, I mean, lack of money is one of the obvious sort of symptoms. One
Yeah.
of the flip sides that I've seen is sometimes people stay in jobs, relationships, or situations that are not great because
Yeah.
the money is there. So I feel
Yeah.
like it could be it could be both. So maybe if you're listening to this and you are not satisfied, make sure you're looking at the full picture. But
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably have colleagues that are attorneys that stayed in a corporate situation or stayed with a firm because they felt as if they didn't have a choice. So
Yeah.
even if money was good, they still were in a type of survival mode because they had to gear themselves up every day to go face where they weren't happy or satisfied.
And that is 99.9% attorneys is that you're working, and it's just sad because a lot of it too, I also realize it's not just like the money piece of it. It's also to how hard we've had to work, how much we've actually have put into that. And so letting all of that go and to be quite honest with you, our identities is actually wrapped around that because everyone's
Yes.
proud to say I'm a lawyer, because it's a very esteemed profession, whatever jokes may come after that, but it's
Right.
just that, so giving all of that up to the ego is quite scary. And so that's why, and for some reasons, like we can't see ourselves doing anything else. I know for me, I was actually groomed to be a lawyer since I was 2 years old because my father was like Minister of Finance for our country. And so for me, it was just like what I was supposed to do. You're either a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer. Those are the top
Mhm.
three things you can do. And so it's just letting go of the identity piece of it. And it's just like, and I get it. I mean, when I graduated from law school, I had 6 figures of debt, because I went to a private law school. I was in Europe, it's, studying. So there's a lot of different layered pieces to it, and we really have to meet those different parts of yourself. But you really have to ask yourself: are you more connected to holding into a piece of identity, or are you connected to, or what's more? Or do you just want to be happy? For me, it just came down to, okay, do I really want to be happy? And then also too, we can also change the way we actually work, And so for me, I still practice, but it's like, but I speak a lot more. But it's like, okay, for
Right.
example, I realized, okay, I now do IP law, which I love. I work with creators, I work with visionaries, so I work with heart-centered businesses and startup companies. So it's like I'm no longer going to court arguing, which I absolutely hate it. To me, I just it's pointless. You know what I mean? So it's like you can change into your way to where, for me, where you're bringing the inspiration in, like the heart piece of it, the love, and you're doing. You don't. It doesn't be like sterile and austere.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's fantastic. So you did for quite a while, you were arguing in court
I
and
did.
you
Yeah, I hated it. When I first was working with a law firm, they did like a bait and switch. When I hired, I was like, yeah, I want to do transaction work. I want to be, because I've always been interested in transaction work and IP. And when I got there, I was in court every freaking single day. I was on breach of contract cases. However, God rest his soul, to my former boss, he was like, and I remember like one day going to court just absolutely like exacerbated. And I came back to court and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. We had the kind of call you could scream. All right. So I don't want people to think I was like losing it. And so I was like, when you hired me, you told me I was going to be doing this and this. He says, young lady, sit down. I'm like, okay, what? He says, calm down. He says, what kind of cases do I have do I have you go to court? And I was like, there are more breach of contract cases from companies in South America. And he was like, yeah. He goes, well, how do you think you're able to draft a contract if you don't know what happens when things go wrong? And so he was like, you're going to be a extremely good transaction lawyer because you've litigated for 2 years breach
right.
of contract cases. So I tell you right now, I was like, oh my God, when he said that to me, I was like, wow. I mean, he was such a maestro. He was such a master. He was actually teaching me, giving me what I want, but he was preparing me. And I can tell you right now, when I drop the contract, it's literally, okay, I'm thinking for when everything, like with everything blows up. That's how I
That's
draft the
right.
contract, when everything blows up from that perspective. So everything is covered, as opposed to like, when you enter something, oh, it's all going to be all honky dory. It's like, no, things happen. Breaches
Mhm.
happen. And so your contracts have to actually like account for that. You're in real estate, so you definitely know.
Yes, we definitely know. Yes. So
Yeah.
that was a trial by fire. That was actually another version of gaining knowledge and expertise by purification,
Yeah.
being in the court and arguing and doing the work that you didn't feel like you wanted to do. And you've had how many people have been blessed now because you went through being in those courtrooms because now you
100.
brought your expertise to them today.
Yeah, and even talking about it, I just feel it in my heart because I realized he was such a great mentor for me. He was so hard on me. And he always told me, because I know you're not gonna stay with me. Because I'm actually preparing you for whenever you leave me. And I tell you what, Bridget, everything that man told me how to do, I do it. Even my signature block on my emails is from
Hmm.
2003. I've changed nothing.
That's
I've changed
fantastic.
even the color blue that I use. It's because of him. I'm telling you, everything he taught me how to do, it is, and I'm like, thank you, Mitchell.
That's great. That is really great. It's wonderful when you have someone like that in your life, in your career,
Yeah,
and it just has that lasting of an effect.
yeah,
So you are making strides, you're working on your next TED Talk, you're
yeah.
working on the project in your personal life. What else is on the horizon for you? You're doing more speaking. Share a little bit more about the change that you're embracing and what's coming for you.
So right now I'm actually recording this for you from Houston, where I'm with my mom. Normally I would actually be in France, and so, but I came here to actually speak, and so The next big move of change is I'm actually moving from Paris to the French Riviera. And it's a really big move for me because I'm very much a Parisian. But what happened was my apartment was sold by the landlord. And so I have been pretty much spending like my summers in the Riviera. But if you don't know France, everything revolves around Paris. And so it is a big change for me. And so I'm actually going to go there and just start all over there again, even though it'll be much different because I do know the language. I do know people that's in Nice, which is where I'll be. But it's a big deal for me because I'm giving up and I absolutely love Paris.
Hmm.
But it was a part of me feeling stagnant in Paris. I was feeling, okay, I don't feel like I'm growing. And I feel like I'm like just enjoying like too much of the good life. And so it's okay, you know what? Let me just go there and stretch a bit, face and push some edges to restart my life, to restart my connections and to, to play there.
And you're going to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
It's going to be uncomfortable, which is one of your recurring themes of get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I want to bring our listeners up to speed because I don't think we mentioned this. So you were living and working in Miami
Hmm.
and you ended up moving to Paris.
Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
I first moved to Paris in 2012, and just
Hmm.
the backstory was like it was New Year's Eve in 2011 or 2010. I'm sorry. I woke up. I had plans to go and party with my friends, and I just abruptly decided not to go, but stayed home and to like analyze my life because I had a horrible year that year. I had fallen in love for the first time. My heart was broken. I wasn't making any money because my attention was just so into this relationship. And I had just started my law firm and I didn't really know how to run a business. So I ended up doing this like organic process of like looking at what went right, looking at what went wrong, and writing these things out and really like taking radical self responsibility and asking myself, okay, what really happened? And each of like the things that didn't go so right. And it really came down to, like I said, I was really focusing on a relationship. And then I really began to look at what was I believing about myself? Because I was on a spiritual path and I knew what was happening on the outside of my life was because of what I was believing about myself. And so I wrote everything down. And I just got on all fours and I prayed the most reverent prayer, asking God, universe, to help me to let go of all of that. And then the next part of the day, I always get a journal every year on New Year's Eve to begin for the new year. And I
Right.
got the book one is it had the word imagine, and I just began to write for hours about what I wanted to be, to have an experience. I was setting intentions around it, visualizing. About midnight came, I took one sip of champagne and I passed out because I was tired. I'd been since 6 o'clock that morning. And I never wrote that I wanted to leave Miami, but what I was asking for internally was I want to change so bad. And then 3 days later, like all of these signs began, my whole life began bombarded with like all these signs about Paris, Paris, Paris. It was never a city that I was connected to. I wasn't like a typical American, like all cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs about it. And so I ended
Right.
up moving, just following signs, selling my place, selling my car, giving my own things to different charities, moving without knowing a single person, not one word of French, not having any plan A, B, C, D whatsoever. And so, yeah, I initially went in 2012. And so I was like kind of back and forth until because I didn't know I was gonna end up living there. I was just, like, following signs that led me there. So, which
Right.
is crazy.
How long were you in Paris before you decided you were going to stay and make it long term?
So, initially, I went for 3 months, and, Americans can be in Europe with the Schengen region for 3 months without
Hmm.
anything. Then I had to come back to Miami because I did have one case that was in court. It was, like, on a divorce settlement case, and so I was there in Miami for 3 months, and then when I went back, I was writing at the time, and I was just praying, asking God and angels, "Okay, what am I supposed to be doing here?" Because obviously, I'm not gonna take another bar exam in a language I don't know, you know?
That was one of my
And
questions I
yeah.
was going to ask.
And I just heard go back to the US and get a visa. And so I went back to Miami and I was there for 6 months. I began to research all the different types of visas. And I ended up just applying on my own for the long stay visa, which you can be there in Paris for a year. Granted, you can show like you're self-sufficient, you can't
Right.
work. So I went
Right.
there like in 2013, on Valentine's Day. And so then I just began my sojourn there and I just started my life there. And then I was like, wait a minute, I kind of like living here. So let me just figure out, okay, how do I get on the French healthcare because I began to learn all the different things about living there. And so then I found out, okay, I need to set up a company, hire a lawyer. I came back to the US for like 2.5 years. So then I returned back in 2019. So in the beginning, it was always kind of like, back and forth, back and forth. But I've been living there consistently since 2019.
Nice.
in the summertime, yeah. So Paris is home for me, but I do come back to the United States. I do spend the winters here. My parents are here, and so whenever I do speak, like I was supposed to be speaking, keynoting at an event in Pennsylvania on Friday, but it was canceled because of what's going on, and so we're
Right.
postponed until the fall. And so I'm here in Houston with my mom. I go see my father in Minneapolis. So I always, when I come to the U.S., I don't just come to speak. I always, I make it like a time here where I spend like a couple of weeks here, then I go back
Mhm.
and then I can see my parents, which are older.
I think that's fantastic. And so
Thank
now and you've got this new adventure of moving down to Nice.
Yes, yes. I'm gonna give it a year. I always my motto is, you know what, with any change, you can always go back. It's not like Paris is not gonna be there, it's always gonna be there. So it's like if it doesn't work, if I don't like it, I can always move back. And so I probably won't. No, I just know how Murphy's Law works, right? I probably won't, but I don't know. We'll see. But I'm gonna at least give it
We'll
a year.
see. Well,
Yeah.
it's really interesting, and I love that you said that. You can move to Nice, and if you miss Paris, you can move back to Paris, right? The
Yeah.
You mentioned in your TED Talk that change is something that humans typically rebel against in a very strong fashion. You use different words than that. And you shared a statistic about how change is so hard for so many people that they actually equate it to some of the worst things that can happen in life or even
Death.
death.
Yeah.
Right. Could you talk a little bit about that and explain how that could be impacting people that are listening to you and I talk right now?
Well, first, I want to say it's not your fault. It is neurological. Our brains is designed to actually make us safe. It's not designed to give us a luxurious life. It's designed to keep it in the familiar, even if it sucks. But it's just what it knows. So any type of change whatsoever, it just deems it as a threat, right? And so it's like a thermostat. So, for example, if you have your thermostat set at 73, is what it always is, and you put it on a 64, your brain is going to work to get you back to 73. You're working with that, like it's from a neurological standpoint. And so, that's why people fear. And so people are also, there's also other factors to where there's a great sense of loss, that we feel like we're giving up something rather than, focusing, okay, what is it going to actually, what I'm going to gain from this, right? And it's because it's the unknown, because we don't quite know what the changes are just going to be. But we don't realize that it's only going to be unknown for a little bit, because once you get, and now at Paris, well, when I first got to Paris, for instance, it was like the freaking Twilight Zone. Like literally, it's how I feel like I just walked on the moon. But now I feel more like a Parisian, like doing American.
Hmm.
And so it's no longer feeling like that to me. And so I just have to tell your listeners that, you have to go against your brain. You have to like basically, take small steps, so you don't have to, conquer Rome in a day. So for example, it could just start to retrain your brain to do something completely different. So for example, if you always go a specific route to work, take a different
Yeah.
work. You know what I mean? If you always like, okay, eat with your right hand or use your right hands to wipe your makeup off, use your left hand. It's just a matter of like
Right.
getting it to your brain and the habit of experiencing something that's quite different. So you're programming it or reprogram to not feel afraid, not to take any type of differences to be a threat. So when you come time to leave the job or to leave the relationship or move across the country, it's not so bad. You know what I mean? It's not. It's like it's kind of used to it, and so it won't fight
Mhm.
you so much as it did or give you so much pushback.
And I think you also recommend, like, get comfortable being uncomfortable, like,
Yeah.
crave being uncomfortable and be on alert for being too comfortable too long. Like, you should panic is a strong word, but if you notice, like, you're in a groove and you're comfortable and everything is kind of too smooth and easy, like, that should be an alarm to go off and say, "Wait, am I complacent?"
Yeah, change is not hard, but it is uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable because like I get it, you're working with, your brain and things like that. So, but it's only uncomfortable for a little bit because it's unfamiliar. And so like what you need to do is to actually take the discomfort eventually will actually like disperse. And so it'll disperse whenever the unfamiliar becomes familiar, because at a certain point, okay, you're gonna get used to it, the new relationship, the new position, the new city, the new whatever. And so we have to start being okay with being a little bit of uncomfortable. And I have to say too, for those of us who are in America, whatever we're uncomfortable with, it's an inconvenience compared to like you see whatever else is going on. And I mean, so
Right.
for me, really have to put your life in perspective in terms of okay, what's really uncomfortable. It's really an inconvenience because at the end of the day, my worst things I've ever faced in my life is only been like discomfort. It's only in luxury. Like literally. I mean, I'm drinking bottled water here, and I'm a bottled water snob, with the crystal in it, and that's like first world problems.
Right.
And so you get this perspective when you live other places or you travel, you just kind of see how other people live, and we just begin to realize we have it so good here. I mean, just by being born
Right.
in America, you won the birth lottery for real.
Right. And that it's gonna be okay.
It is gonna be, and I've realized that as well too, and going back to, like, the forgiveness is like or not beating yourself because I realize in this life, we always get what we want because we're creating it all. We really are creating it all, and so we really have to relax and just, like, understand it's all gonna work out. It literally is gonna work out, and everything is conspiring for you for it to
For
work out.
you.
Yeah.
Especially once you decide and get clarity around what you actually want.
Yeah, and it's
And
from your heart. I think the problem comes when, the friction comes when you're not living in alignment. Because so many of us, and I feel like the changes that actually happen now with so many people is that, for example, so many people are not feeling like enthusiastic about the work. They're feeling like very like blah about it. And it's because we're all moving from places of comfort to places of alignment. Like what's more aligned for us to be doing or for us to be.
well, and I think kind of tying back to how some people will stay in work or with a company where they're not in alignment and they're also not happy, but it is satisfying the financial side of
Yeah.
things. It's a friction that will wear you down. And if you think that it's not having an impact on you and you can compartmentalize it and that it won't have an impact, in my experience, it usually has a long-term impact and it will wear you down.
For sure, your health would tell you that your health will give up on you eventually. But for me, like with the law firm, at one point I was like suffering from chest pains because I was in such a pressure cooker. And I remember like going for like spend an entire year going from doctor to doctor trying to diagnose chest pains. Doctors were looking at me crazy, like, what are you doing? I was seeing our cardiologist. And
Mhm.
everyone's like, "What are you doing?" I'll never forget. I saw this like one older gentleman. He was like, "Young lady, how old are you?" I was like, I told him. He was like, "Okay, do you have a house?" I said, "Well, I have a condo." He's like, do you have a husband?" I said, "No." "Do you have any kids?" He goes, "No." Because you have it. And he just kept asking me all these things that would stress you out. So he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a lawyer." He says, "Okay." He says, "Well, honey, I am, 70 years old. I've got a wife. I've got 5 kids. I've got 15 grandkids. I've got a house. I've got a boat. I've got a summer house." He goes, "I sleep very well at night. What do you do in my office?" And for me, he was like, I know you're a first year associate, because I explained to him, he's like, you got to pay your dues, but he was just like, it's not worth it. And the doctor after him that I actually went to, he was like holistic doctor. He was like kind of intuitive. He was like, you know what? I know you're quite young. Let's just do a mammogram. So he did a mammogram on me and they found a lump in my breast. And I had to go through 2 biopsies from that. And it was all benign. And that was like led me on my spiritual path because he was just like, it's not worth it. He's like, he was explaining to me like, from a holistic or spiritual point of view, or, every dis-ease in the body is coming from some type of like, dysregulation. He was like, in the chest area, the breast is like, it's grief you're holding on to. It is sadness. It is anxiety. He was like, start meditating, like start going outside. And he was like, and breathing. And so, which is why like I incorporate all these different things. And so it's like, yeah, I had to really stop the way I was actually working. So that was a factor as well too, and actually going off on my own because I
Mhm.
had no life working at the firm. I was like billing 2,100 hours, working
Right.
14-hour days, 7 days a week. On the weekends, I was working, 8 hours. The first year of my work at the firm, I never came to see my parents. I was making money. I
Right.
was running course and doing that, but I was freaking miserable and I had
Yeah.
no life and it's not worth it.
Well,
Absolutely not.
on a very practical note, with living in Paris and having your own firm, is your
Mhm.
firm are your clients primarily in the US or are they primarily in France?
They're primarily in the US, and then I have
Mhm.
European clients because I
Mhm.
do IP work or IP law, and so IP is federal. I can register it, I can work with anyone in the US. I can also register trademarks in the EU. And so yeah, I'm not tethered to being like in the United States. And I actually created my life that way because I've always known when I was 6 years old, I said that I wanted two things. I said I wanted to live between the US and the Europe, and I wanted to have three homes and live like that. And so I'm actually like living like a manifested 6-year vision when people laughed at me. But yeah, so that's how I've been able to do it. And so I just target my practice to where I can be unethical, obviously, with my bar, and just to where I'm actually like satisfying my own quest for living a fulfilled, happy life. which for me includes living in Europe.
I think that's fantastic. So
Thank
you
you.
really you got in alignment because you've
Yeah.
created your own firm. You are protecting your body to the best of your ability by making that change. So you
Yeah.
were starting to see the manifestation of being in a pressure cooker where there was a disconnect between, I would say, like your core values and what you wanted your life to be and the life you were living in that particular practice. And
Yeah, and
now you put
go ahead,
yourself
I'm
in a
sorry.
whole different place. Now you've put yourself in a whole different place and a whole different daily experience that is more in alignment with that vision you had even as a young child.
Yeah, and also to know, like, for attorneys, we work like so hard. I mean, there's no such thing as a lazy lawyer, and it's just we're worker bees, right? But we're taught our working is not healthy. It's like very hustle oriented. And so, for example, when I went to Paris the second time, I lost all of my clients, and I really had to learn, rely on the universe for abundance and really opening up. And looking back at that time period, and now I realize, okay, the reason why I lost all my clients is because I was being shown a different way to work, which is to work through pleasure, to work through, not having like a traditional law firm and to doing work that I actually enjoy or having clients to where I believe in their vision. And so, yeah, because I didn't know any other way to work. And the way I was conditioned to work was going to leave me in the hospital.
This has been remarkable. I want to thank you. Do you have another book coming out? Do you think there's another book
I
inside of you as well?
There's like 4. So I actually have a book that I wrote when I first got to Paris. It's literally sitting in my laptop right now. And so it's called There's Spirituality and There's Truth. And it's all about walking the spiritual path from a modern day girl who's actually living it, or modern day
Nice.
person. I do have my Paris memoir. It's called 84 Rue Nollet, which is like my very first apartment that I actually settled into.
Hmm.
And then my 4th book that I've already started on is basically a photography book it's called Bikes and Stillness. It's basically photographs of just bikes in Paris because Paris. Have you been to Paris before?
Oh, yes. Yes, yes.
So you know how beautiful, right?
Yes.
So it's like literally photographs of just bikes, like not with the owner, but just like also like a beautiful scene or a beautiful background. And I'll just take a photograph. So I want like one of these like really huge like coffee table books. And it's like my
Hmm.
passion, like French project. So that's my 4th book that's within me. And I'll probably write a book about change as well too.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Wani. This has been just remarkable. I want to thank you for sharing your journey and some of the big, bold moves that you've made that have allowed you to come to where you are today. And
Thank you.
I just want to highlight as well that it's a great life. It's a great life that you've described and you're living and you're in it and you're proactively seeking that alignment with yourself. And at the same time, forgiving yourself and seeking if you're able to create more change in your life that you may desire. Yeah, it is very inspiring. Anyone that is listening, you can reach out to Wani, and all of her connections, including a link to her TED Talk, will be anywhere that you're consuming this podcast. So I want to thank you, Wani, for being our guest and sharing so much with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I love that you got the meaning behind the title of the podcast, because really what we talked about today, that everything that is in our subconscious mind, you said very quickly at one point, because really our subconscious mind is controlling everything, which is so true. And that is such a key part of our inner state.
Yes.
I would love maybe next year if you could come back and join us again and give us an update on everything you've accomplished in the year.
Anytime.
And I
Thank
am
you.
planning probably next year to be out in France for quite a bit. So we might have to meet up for a coffee and take some pictures of bikes. And I'll swing down to Nice and I'll be able to see you there as well. If you're listening to this episode of The Inner Estate, I hope that you will join us again for the next episode. Thank you, Wani, and thank you. If you're listening, have a great day.